Western trainers who haven't fought anything like the Ukraine war are readying Kyiv's soldiers to fight the Russians. And oddly enough, it works. This is the story of one of the most unlikely military training operations in modern history, and why it's becoming a game changer for Ukraine's defense. More than 56,000 Ukrainian troops have been trained by Western allies under the UK-led Operation Interflex since June 2022. That's an army-sized force, all prepared for Europe's biggest land war since World War II. But here's the twist that nobody talks about. Many of the Ukrainian soldiers arriving for training come straight from the trenches, fresh from drone strikes, artillery barrages, and brutal frontline combat. Meanwhile, some of their Western instructors have never fought in a war like the one these Ukrainians just escaped. It sounds backwards, doesn't it? How can someone teach you to survive something they've never experienced themselves? But the human cost of this war extends far beyond statistics.
In place without Ukraine. We are hearing some ideas about, for instance, the land swap. And the land swap is not just the swapping the territory. It's also about people living in those territories. Putin is now saying that one of the suggestions would be that Ukraine should give up the rest of Donetsk region. Well, the rest of Donetsk region is 33% of that region. That's the territory that's bigger than the size of the state of Delaware for those in the U.S. That's the territory that still has the cities. The city of Kramatorsk, which has about 80,000 people living there, the city of Slavyansk, which used to have 100,000 people living there, much less right now. So it's thousands of people who are living in those territories whose fate is going to be decided without people whom they choose to represent themselves as presidents, as president, as a member of parliament, and so on and so forth. So we are afraid that this conversation will become very technical, and then people whose fate is being decided will be forgotten there. So that's of course our big fear.
When we talk about territory and negotiations, we're talking about real people. Thousands living in cities like Kramatorsk with its 80,000 residents, or Slavyansk. These aren't just dots on a map. They're communities with families, schools, and hospitals. The remaining 33% of Donetsk region that Russia seeks represents an area larger than Delaware, filled with Ukrainian citizens whose fate hangs in the balance. As diplomatic negotiations intensify, Ukrainian leaders worry that the technical details of territorial discussions might overshadow the human reality of what's at stake. The pressure for a resolution is mounting from all sides. Ukrainian President Zelensky recently held virtual meetings with President Trump and European leaders ahead of crucial summit discussions with Putin. Their message was clear: Ukraine must be present at the table.
Що стосується перемовин, в будь-якому випадку вони важливі на рівні лідерів. Але говорити про Україну без України неможливо, і ніхто це не прийме. Тому розмова президента Сполучених Штатів і Путіна, безумовно, може бути важливою для їх двостороннього треку, але нічого про Україну без нас вони прийняти не можуть. І я дуже вірю і надіюсь, що президент Сполучених Штатів це розуміє і усвідомлює. Безумовно, у нас буде зустріч на рівні лідерів трьохстороння. Я не знаю дату. Якщо ми хочемо закінчити війну, так воно і буде. І там будуть підніматись ті чи інші питання.
No decisions about Ukraine can be made without Ukraine. While bilateral talks between major powers might be important, the principle remains firm. Ukraine's sovereignty means Ukraine must participate in determining its own future. There's hope for eventual three-party meetings, though the timeline remains uncertain. The exhaustion is real, but so is the determination.
People are extremely exhausted from living under this fear. As of right now, as we speak right now, literally half of Ukraine is under air raid alert. And air raid alert was lifted literally 5 minutes ago in Kyiv itself. That's unfortunately our daily reality. There are roughly 1 million people serving in the armed forces, including my partner who has started serving at the very beginning of the invasion. And of course, there is nothing more that I want than him to come back home safe, and then for us to resume our life as much as possible as it used to be prior to 2022. But the problem is that we are not sure if that can be achieved by simply swapping the land. Furthermore, the very idea of swapping has, frankly speaking, has never been really pulled in Ukraine. So we don't have an understanding of how much people can support this idea. But the idea that was being suggested and that was being discussed, and we can get some polling about that, is the idea of freezing the line of conflict. And the reality is, of course, that more and more people are willing to accept the freezing of the line of the conflict, of the front line, on those lines where the fighting is currently taking place right now. The idea of swapping the land is so unexpected and so unacceptable in the 21st century that it has never been seriously discussed in Ukraine. There are lots of emotional reactions right now, but if you ask me about some sociological polling or something, that hasn't been done because this has never been discussed, just voluntarily giving up part of our territory.
After years of war, with half the country often under air raid alerts, Ukrainians are understandably tired. Soldiers have been serving since 2022, families have been separated, and the constant threat of attack has worn on the population. Yet despite this exhaustion, the idea of voluntarily giving up territory remains unacceptable to most Ukrainians. While some might accept freezing current front lines out of necessity, the concept of willingly swapping land in the 21st century goes against everything they've been fighting for. Ukraine has proven it holds more cards than many expected.
One cannot say that we don't have any cards at all. If we didn't have any cards at all, Putin would have taken over the city of Kyiv in 2022, but he couldn't do that. Even his advancement in Donbas region, the territory which he took over, bigger part of that, in 2014, he couldn't take it over after 3.5 years of a full-scale invasion. So Ukraine is not as strong as we want it to be, but it's not as weak as President Trump presented it to be in that unfortunate meeting in the Oval Office. Ukrainian army is now the strongest army in Europe. And I think that is one of the things that European leaders are getting to understand right now. There is no stronger army in the European continent than Ukrainian army. Ukrainian army is seeing lots of innovations, which many countries are just catching up to. For instance, drones, robots, and so on and so forth. Again, those are the things that Ukrainian army has, and we cannot simply say that we have no cards to play. Do we want to have more? Of course. Air defense is most critical. The ability to fight in the air and lack of that ability from the Ukrainian side is probably our biggest problem. And frankly speaking, President Trump could help end this war in a different manner by helping Ukraine achieve that air superiority. He chose to go the different way, different path. But again, it doesn't mean Ukraine has no cards to play. If we didn't have any cards to play, we would have lost this war a long time ago.
The successful defense of Kyiv in 2022 shocked the world. After 3.5 years of invasion, Russia still hasn't taken the Donbass. The Ukrainian army has transformed into what many consider the strongest military force in Europe, pioneering innovations in drone warfare and robotics that are reshaping modern combat. While they need more support, particularly air defense systems, their continued resistance proves they're far from powerless in shaping their own destiny. This reality brings us back to Operation Interflex and why it matters so profoundly. Colonel Boardman, the commanding officer for Operation Interflex, acknowledges this unusual dynamic head-on. He's well aware that his trainers might lack the up-to-date combat experience of the type that defines the Ukraine war. But far from seeing this as a problem, he views it as an opportunity. I'm conscious of our need to have credibility even though we may not have up-to-date combat experience of this type, Boardman told Business Insider. But I don't see that as a disqualifying factor because I think we do have the institutional credibility and expertise that what we're teaching is genuinely valued, and the results speak for themselves. Recent polling data reveals that 90% of trainees who completed Interflex training since January 2025 felt more confident in their lethality and survivability. That's not just a number, that's lives saved on the battlefield. To understand why this works, we need to grasp just how different this war is from anything the West has fought in decades. The West hasn't battled a major, industrialized military power since World War II. Most NATO combat experience comes from counterinsurgency campaigns in Iraq and Afghanistan, conflicts where Western forces enjoyed complete air superiority and faced smaller, less equipped adversaries. Some Interflex trainers weren't even in those conflicts, having joined the military after they ended. Ukraine is fighting something entirely different. They're battling one of the world's largest militaries in a grinding, high-casualty war with no control of the skies. Russia's relentless artillery fire, missile strikes, and widespread drone usage have reshaped the battlefield in ways NATO hasn't faced for generations, or in some cases, at all. For years, Western militaries focused heavily on counterinsurgency skills while maintaining only theoretical capabilities for large-scale conventional warfare. Boardman admits this reality. I think naturally you do shape yourself for the moment, but now there's a renewed focus on combating a well-armed peer-level opponent. That has meant dusting off tactics that haven't been used in anger for decades. So how does training from instructors without recent large-scale combat experience actually help soldiers who've been living that reality? The answer lies in the combination of Western military doctrine with Ukrainian battlefield experience. It's not about replacing Ukrainian knowledge, it's about enhancing it. The magic happens when you combine NATO's institutional knowledge with Ukraine's hard-won battlefield lessons. Western military doctrine provides the foundation, the systematic approach to warfare, logistics, combined arms operations, and tactical principles that have been refined over decades. Ukrainian experience provides the current reality, what actually works against Russian forces, how to survive drone warfare, and how to adapt to the brutal conditions of modern high-intensity combat. Operation Interflex has evolved constantly to incorporate lessons from the front lines. The training combines Ukraine's real-time battlefield experience with NATO's established warfighting principles to create something better than either side's knowledge alone. Ukrainian troops arrive with knowledge of what it's really like to fight Russians. Western trainers provide the structure, tactics, and systematic approach that can turn that experience into teachable skills. This isn't theoretical anymore. The program has produced measurable results. 89% of Ukrainian troops trained by the British Army under Operation Interflex felt better equipped to survive on the battlefield. The most valued element, battlefield first aid, with 93% of basic recruits saying they felt more confident about treating casualties after receiving the training. The training itself is remarkably realistic. At secret locations across the UK, Ukrainian recruits face reproduction Russian trench systems based on actual battlefield layouts from eastern Ukraine. Audio recordings play the simulated screams of injured soldiers and cries of civilians. Smoke swirls through the air as blank rounds are fired during assault exercises. It's designed to inoculate former civilians to the grim realities of war before they return to face the real thing. But the program goes far beyond basic infantry training. Over 2.5 years, it has expanded to include training on UK-supplied equipment, battlefield medicine for Ukrainian medics, and even 2-week courses for Ukrainian military chaplains offering spiritual support to frontline troops. The training adapts constantly to match specific threats being faced on Ukrainian front lines. The international scope is staggering. What started as a UK initiative now includes 13 partner nations: Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Denmark, Finland, the Netherlands, Norway, Sweden, Albania, Estonia, Kosovo, Lithuania, and Romania. Each brings their own expertise and perspective to the training. Stories from the battlefield validate the approach. Colonel Stenhouse recounted feedback about a previously trained section of 10 Ukrainian soldiers pushing back a Russian force many times their number, testament to the effectiveness of Operation Interflex training. Lieutenant Colonel John Harris of the Light Dragoons called the Ukrainian recruits among the most motivated he had trained in 20 years of soldiering, noting they were fighting against an existential threat. The learning goes both ways. When asked what UK trainers could learn from Ukrainian recruits, Harris pointed out that the Ukrainians had experience fighting a 21st century adversary on the battlefield. This creates a feedback loop where Western doctrine informs Ukrainian tactics, while Ukrainian battlefield experience updates Western understanding of modern warfare. The scale of commitment is enormous. The UK has pledged $12.8 billion in support to Ukraine since February 2022, with $7.8 billion specifically for military assistance. The training program alone received $247 million in additional funding this year. The UK has committed to providing $3 billion of military support annually, with Operation Interflex as a central component. But this success comes with costs. Providing training to Ukrainian recruits has significantly reduced training facility availability for the British Army. Army units bidding for training site time in 2023 had their bids rejected 8 times more often than in 2019 because sites weren't available. More than a quarter of the Army's training estate is being used for Operation Interflex, constraining the UK military's ability to train its own soldiers. The program reveals something profound about modern military training. Institutional knowledge, systematic approaches, and proven doctrine can be just as valuable as recent combat experience, sometimes more so. The Ukrainian conflict has shown that even small delays and complications can have massive effects on military operations. Russia's assumption that it could capture Kyiv in days was shattered by Ukrainian resistance that forced costly urban warfare and extended supply lines. Operation Interflex creates soldiers who understand both systematic military principles and current battlefield realities. They're not just trained, they're prepared for the specific challenges of fighting Russian forces in 2025. The combination of Western military science with Ukrainian battlefield wisdom produces fighters who can adapt, survive, and succeed in ways that neither pure experience nor pure doctrine alone could achieve. The program's extension through 2025 signals long-term Western commitment to Ukrainian defense. As Defense Secretary John Healey announced at the Ukraine Defense Contact Group meeting in Germany, the UK will continue to step up our support. We will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes. This isn't just about Ukraine anymore. Operation Interflex is becoming a testing ground for 21st century warfare and a model that other nations could follow. It demonstrates how smaller nations can achieve effective deterrence and how military knowledge can be transferred and enhanced across different combat contexts. The success of Operation Interflex challenges traditional assumptions about military training and combat experience. It shows that the combination of institutional knowledge with battlefield experience can create something more powerful than either alone. As the conflict continues to evolve, this hybrid approach to military training may well become the new standard for preparing forces to face modern, high-intensity warfare. For Ukraine, it means soldiers returning to the front lines with both the hard-won knowledge of their comrades and the systematic training of NATO forces. For the West, it means updating decades-old assumptions about warfare and learning from an ongoing conflict. And for the future of military training worldwide, it represents a new model of how to prepare forces for the complex realities of 21st century combat. The Ukrainian troops trained under Operation Interflex aren't just better soldiers. They're proof that military expertise can transcend direct experience when combined with systematic knowledge and continuous adaptation. In a war where survival often depends on split-second decisions and tactical flexibility, that combination might just make all the difference.